Hey everyone, so this is going to be the walkthrough for the week 4 video on physiology. Does it have a better name? I just wrote paper. Okay, so quickly, no humans. Let me pause really quickly. Sorry about that. I have a new cricket breeding habitat and the lid fell off. All I need is crickets all over my house. Okay, so no humans, so don't do a human. You can pick anything else. Pick a plant, pick an animal. I'd say don't go so much with bacteria. It can just be a little tricky, and it's better to go a little bit bigger. You can pick somebody who lives within 50 miles of your home or within your week 5 topic area. I would recommend that you pick somebody within your week 5 topic area because that will give you some of the resources down now for the week 5 assignment. So it'll just save you some time in the long run, but the choice is yours. And then you're going to need to have a diagram regarding this, okay, of your creature, whatever it is, with parts labeled. So you write at least 1,050 word paper on this, and it's going to be briefly describe the environment, temperature, landscape, food sources, etc., and describe the organism's role in the environment. Identify the structures, functions of main organs found in your selected organism. Explain how the organism in the diagram has evolved physiologically. I can't say this word today. Physiologically, there we go, to become suited to its environment. If the organism were to be transported to a significantly different environment, how would things change? Describe that new environment. Would their organ system still be as efficient? Why or why not? And would the organism survive? Why or why not? Okay, you might want to use prompts as headings because that makes me happy personally, but whatever does it for you. Include the diagram, which we've said like 3 times now. Can you tell what people forget to include the diagram? And format your paper consistent with APA guidelines, references, in-text citations, has an introduction, a conclusion, academic research sources, so .edu, .org. Look for, you're probably going to do a lot. It depends on what you do. You'll probably find a really sciencey thing for your diagram. That might take the most time. If you have a hard time finding a diagram that is sciencey, I'm more lenient on that specific one, but make sure you don't do any Wikipedia stuff. Source-wise, depends on what you pick. You might end up spending a lot of time with the National Park Service. You might end up spending a lot of time with like the diversity animal world. It just really depends on what you want. Or plants. Plants might be a little hard to do. I don't know. Because you don't have to do evolution so much. You're doing the physiology, right? Plants might actually be easier. I'm thinking. Depends on how creative you feel. Do you love your pet ivy plant? Then you could probably do it pretty well. Okay, so let's go down. See how I would approach the sucker. I always think organisms is cute, furry, you know, mega vertebrates, because that's what I like, but do whatever you want. When you are picking an animal, look for something before you make your final choice. I would come up with a handful of 3 to 5 and just do some basic research. Try to find something that you can find a diagram form. It doesn't have to be specifically for that specific thing. So like if you do a speckled bear, you might only find a diagram of a bear, and that's fine. Okay, so it can be a little off, but you know, if you're doing a hummingbird, try to find a hummingbird. It won't be the specific hummingbird. Or if you do a fish, try to find a fish that is at least the same kind of fish. Be careful with fish because they evolved at random times and they're just weird. But whatever you do, and then think outside the box. So I want to do some creature. I have a couple. Can I find enough resources on it to discuss it? And then do I think this is something that my teacher has read about 1,000 times? Because then she probably knows a little bit too much about it and will know what you're missing. If you pick up something a little bit more exotic that you can still find information out about, it's better in the long run for you because I, as a teacher, probably don't know as much about it as, I swear crickets are stupid. There's one in there dying now, my habitat. Okay, so if you pick up something that's different, like a cricket, like whoever talks about a cricket, so that might be more interesting. Okay, he found the dry spot of the water dish. I'm going to have to put a sponge in there. I'm not feeling guilty about feeding crickets to my lizard. Give me a second to go save a poor, stupid cricket, and then I will tell you how to write an introduction. Okay, I've rescued the cricket. Now, we are on to introduction. So remember again, the introduction is going to have the same title as your title of your paper because it's the title heading that takes the place of an introduction heading. You do always need that. You always need a conclusion heading too. So In the introduction, you want to talk about adaptations in general and how they help organisms to thrive. We'll just do that for a little bit. Then discuss specialists and generalists. So kind of like who's a specialist, who's a generalist, why these adaptations might be different, that kind of thing. And then I would go into just briefly discussing your specific organism and how it's awesome. So in most cases, you guys will probably pick a specialist. It seems to happen. But you might pick a generalist. Like a rat would be a generalist. It can pretty much live anywhere and thrive. A specialist would be more like a koala, which only needs a very specific food to be able to handle stuff, right? So that kind of thing. And you could say, hey, my critter, this awesome Canis lupus, the gray wolf, is an example of a whatever, okay? So then in with a thesis like genus species has evolved many adaptations such as X, Y, and Z that enable it to thrive in its specific niche, where X, Y, and Z are adaptations that you focus on later in your paper. So I might say for, hey, my bearded dragon moved. He's been staring at me the whole time I've been making this video. So I might say that if I'm talking about guinea pigs, since I'm staring at one, what is the genus species for a guinea pig? It's something cave. So let's just say it's cave. So has evolved many adaptations such as strong teeth, let's say thick fur, and good hearing. So those would be the things I'm going to talk about later. I might say great digestive system, you know, good heart rate, wingspan if I was talking about somebody else, a plant. I might talk about nutrient cycle. If I did a cactus, you know, that would be really fun to do a cactus. I would talk about the whole, like, how it has a specific cycle because it's a C4 plant, I believe. So that kind of thing. So we'll talk about that stuff. So then environment and role. Where does it live? What is it like there? Discuss points that will be relevant in the evolution section. So if I talk about a guinea pig, they're originally from Peru. They live in other people's tunnels. They do whatever, right? And then are they a predator, producer, scavenger, herbivore, specialist, generalist? They would probably be considered more of a generalist. However, they are definitely a scavenger. And they are prey, right? You know, they're totally an herbivore. So then the main organs. So this is where you're going to stick in your diagram and make sure you say a note to see your diagram, like as seen in the figure above, blah, 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 blah. Okay? It helps if your diagram actually points out the organs and the structures that you're going to talk about. Always nice. If it doesn't, feel free to add like some text boxes and just add a couple in, whatever becomes necessary. What are the neat organs adaptations of your organism? So all that you're going to talk about in here. Now in the evolution section, so you already talked about the environment and its role, right? You talked about the organs. So now you're going to connect the two together and say how this organ, or organ Q, helps it live in its home as a whatever. So the teeth that the guinea pig has allow it to live as an herbivore because it's able to eat down all the food, and it's also got those strong teeth that it uses to help adapt previously used tunnels to better suit it. So this is one thing that these last two sections, or even all three, I say the last two sections. The last two sections, if you wanted to, you can combine them and say, okay, so the first organ I'm going to talk about is the teeth. And then here's what the teeth are in the guinea pig, and then this is how they help it to thrive in its environment and its role. And then the next organ I'm going to talk about is their ability to pee everywhere. I don't think it's really a benefit, but I just had to cage clean. And then you would talk about how that would benefit it and how that helps it. And then you would do that for like 2 or 3 structures. This will keep you from getting a brain dump, because this is another one where mind dump, brain dump, whatever you like to call it, is really easy to happen because you learn all these really cool adaptations and you want to tell them all to me. The way to avoid that is to make sure that you tie everything back to your thesis. And your thesis is that these adaptations help it to live where it's living. So through time, it evolved these adaptations because they made it more productive in its chosen environment. Okay? So then new environment. Let me pause for a sec. We are on like day 2 of owning a bearded dragon, and he disappeared. I can't see him from this angle, so I just want to make sure he was okay. All right, back to the point. So new environment. So the first thing you need to do is think about, okay, I've talked about the environment that my critter lives in now. So if I do the guinea pigs, he lives in more of a grasslandy kind of area, and he previously used tunnels, right? Occupied tunnels that were abandoned for his own thing. So now I need to come up with a new environment. As a scientist, I would be tempted to look at this thing and think, okay, how would climate change affect this environment, and pick that as my new environment, because it'd be a really easy conclusion to do. So I might say, okay, climate change is going to flood the tunnels, so it's going to turn into what was a grassland is now going to be a swampland full of rivers. So he's going to be more like a capybara or a swimming, loving, huge rodent instead of a little tiny, not so much into the water rodent. So that's what I'm saying. So it's going to be more of like the swampy, wet area. So that's why I've defined what this is very clearly. So now I can talk about the environments. So I've already talked, or the organs. I've already talked about the organs and the physiology in whatever, the main organ structure. So I'm talking about those organs again briefly here, because you don't need to go into so much depth. So if I talked about the teeth, I'd say, well, in a swampy thing, teeth being so strong may not be so important because everything's kind of wet. But beavers have really strong teeth and they do really well. So maybe the guinea pig could learn to develop its own dam system. Who knows? Give it enough time, right? And then if I talked about, you know, they pee everywhere, well, this would help because it would all just become one with the water. I don't know. So we could talk about those kind of things in this new environment that you came up with. Then I'd have to decide, would my organism survive? So do I feel like it can survive with its current adaptations? So I would probably say for guinea pig in a swampland with too much water that it has to learn to swim instantly, probably not so much. If this was a slow process, sure. But since global warming is likely to be much more quickly in fewer generations to allow time for evolution, probably not so much. So probably say, no, if it was to turn to swampland, we're screwed. So then I go into conclusion. Remember, you have to have that conclusion heading. And I would say something about how important adaptations are to an organism, but how these adaptations can specialize the organism to a specific locale. So I've talked about all this stuff, and I've talked about a new location, right? So if your organism can do all the locations, you say, dude, organism adaptations are amazing. The adaptations of, you know, Rattus norvegicus, the Norwegian rat, has allowed us to become a generalist, and it can survive anywhere, including, I might bring in here, like if climate change happens, we're set to go, right? If I'm doing the guinea pig, I'm saying like they're too specialized, you know. That's great. They're awesome at the locale they live in. If you put them somewhere else, they're not going to survive. And I might spread that out by saying, you know, for animals that are generalists, there's not going to be any issue with something like climate change, or where they're specialists, but it's going to be the exact specialization that they need, they'll do fine, you know, but all creatures may not survive so luckily. Okay, so that's all that stuff. Then, it's just the whole what's weighted the most, as you can see with the weights. We'll do that in the next section. Let's look at weights again in the list, the traditional rubrics. Let me pause it and pull that up. Okay, so this is the same thing. I broke it down, gave you what it was, and then my little reminders and how many points are out of. So you can see the first two are out of 3. Expect you to spend decent time. The diagram, it's 2 points. It's 1 point for having the diagram, 1 point to talking about it. So this is just a reminder, if you give me an image, make sure you tell me why you gave it to me. The reader doesn't know. They can't read your mind. I know it's hard. I know it seems so obvious. It's like when you're writing, like duh, but you have to point that out because sometimes the reader just may not be able to get to the right frame of mind, or maybe they skim down, they're just reading that one section. So make sure that you tell them why. Evolution's out of 3 points. So that means the first half of the paper, before we get to the new environment, is ignoring the diagram, is 9 points. So that's more or less half your paper, a little more. The second half is going to be 6 points, which is on this new evolution, new environment. So you know you're going to have a little bit heavier on the top than in the second part, because this is really kind of a 2-part paper. And then you're combining the two through your thesis, and then of course your conclusion at the end. Again, references, make sure you have a full reference. You'll get a 0 if you don't. You need to have an in-text citation. You'll get a 0 on the paper if you don't. You need to double space. You'll get a 0 on the paper if you don't. If you have first-person point of view, I will take off a lot of points. If you do not have a thesis, I will take off a lot of points. Since I gave you a thesis, I think that's fair. Okay, so here's all the examples that you have. I hope this makes sense. I hope this helps to clarify. Just really get in there. I would, like I said, do some basic research on that week 5 topic area and what lives there and what you think is cool, and pick a few things and to focus in and figure out who's going to be the best. Okay? Enjoy.